lightning round. Great theme song. I really like that. I think it really appealed to me. So, hi, I'm Dave Kershner, and this is the inaugural episode of the Dave Kershner Lightning Round podcast. I'm your host, and this is episode 1. I guess I should get started with some background. I am the third of 4 sons in a military family. My dad had done all of his moving around before he had children, so I didn't get to go to the fun places where he was stationed, like Hawaii and Florida and San Diego and all those nice sunny locales. I grew up in the hills of Northern Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, Manassas, Bull Run, you name it. If there was a hill or a tree or a valley, we went exploring in it. My dad eventually retired to southern North Carolina, took us down to an area near Fort Bragg in the Sandhills region. And that place is like hell's furnace, man, I'll tell you. There's so much sand in the soil that, A, you can't grow much unless you mend the hell out of it. And 2, it just seems to suck in all of the heat from the sun and just radiate it back out at you, and it'll just cook you from the inside out, really. All 3 of my brothers served in the military. My oldest brother was a nuclear engineer on the USS Carl Vinson. And he swears that the recruiter told him it was only 4 years, so he's still kind of pissed about it being 6. So we just laugh at him and call him an idiot. My next oldest brother, he was an electrical engineer for an F-18 fighter squadron out of Miramar. He, when he eventually got out, he went and got a master's in electrical engineering at the University of New South Wales down in Australia. So he works now as a mechanical engineer for a large pharmaceutical company that makes self-dispensing insulin and pens and stuff like that. And then my little brother, he did ROTC through college, came out as an officer in the Army. I should mention that my 2 older brothers wound up in the military because they needed the firm guiding hand, as only the military can provide. They made a few mistakes, and the military straightened them out. My little brother wound up in the Army. He was an EOD officer, ran the Iraqi bomb school for a while. But ironically, or magically, I don't know, depending on how you want to look at it, he every time he came home, his wife magically got pregnant. I'm not sure how that worked, but he's got 5 kids, and his wife wanted him stateside, so he did a branch transfer from EOD into non-nuclear chemical biologic. And he said the best way to explain that is to say that when a dirty bomb goes off, when a nuclear weapon goes off, they go in, they take readings, they take samples, and they can generally tell you what lab that fissile material was being generated in. And the capacity to do that for non-nuclear things is kind of an up-and-coming deal. So his group would be the group that would be sent to Japan, for example, when they had all the sarin gas attacks in the subways, and they would go in, take samples, do that kind of stuff. He didn't go to Japan to do that, but that's what his unit would do. But he got downsized in the Obama force reductions, and but they gave him credit for his 20. So he wound up going back to the Pentagon doing the same job he was doing, but did it as a civilian, and makes 50% more money. So go figure. There was a series of incidents in high school. I got a sports-related injury, And when I tried to enlist in the Marine Corps after high school, they told me I had to stay home, let the knee heal. And I knew I was not ready for college. I'd been accepted to college. I had a sports scholarship, but that didn't work out. And my dad said, hey, I can respect this decision. That's fine. I'm glad to see you're not going to waste my money, but you're not going to live here for free. So get a job. And so that's what I did. And I went and I started building houses. I got a job as a carpenter. I don't think they let me touch a hammer for about 6 months. I was basically a pack mule. Here, take this bundle of 2x4s that was just delivered and get it all up onto the 3rd floor. Well, that sounds like fun. So I went from 140 pounds dripping wet, graduating from high school, and when my friends came home for Christmas after their first semester of college, I'd put on 50 pounds of muscle, and they all swore I was doing steroids. So, what can you do? But I don't know. I guess to make extra money while I was building houses, I would ask if the landscapers or the plumbers or the electricians or the roofers, whoever, the tile guy, the sheetrockers, whatever, if they needed an extra hand on the weekends or whatever. So I picked up a lot of skills that way, which my dad actually took full advantage of, because we came to a bartered agreement for my rent. Basically, they had 5 acres down there. Excuse me. And he made me pay rent by doing manual labor around the property. He put in a pool, so I had to landscape the entire backyard around the pool, and so I used all these connections to get stuff for cut rate prices. Azaleas are really big down there, dogwoods, lilacs, all kinds of flowering trees and shrubs and stuff like that. So I landscaped that. I rented a ditch witch and ran the overflow pipe from the pool over into a large field, so it could water the field whenever we needed to drain water after some torrential downpours, etc. So that was a lot of fun. Ironically, my parents bought this house, right, for $110,000 in 1986. 5 acres, 3,600 square feet, 110 grand. Crazy, right? Well, they were there for about 15 years. All the kids had grown up, moved out, graduated college, getting married. They sold the house. They sold the house for almost $500,000. I didn't get any of that sweat equity money back. You believe that? He kept all of it. While I was building houses, I realized, building houses in 100-degree heat in the Southeast is not a really fun time. So I started taking night classes, and I basically did my first 2 years of college in night school. The day I was supposed to leave for college at Appalachian State, I was notified that the school had lost all of my transfer paperwork. My room assignment had been given away to somebody else, and they were really sorry for the mix-up, and I needed to stay home for an extra semester. Take another night class, they said. As fate would have it, the day I was supposed to leave to go to college, I met my wife. The farm where my best friend lived, I was working out there doing odds and ends and what have you for his dad, and I came to pick him up. We were going to go to a bar. And his mother, Catherine Ann, she was from Charleston, and she was very proper. She did not use conjunctions, and so I came in and I said, "Hey, where's my friend Rob?" Or where's Rob? And she said, "Oh, he's not here, but you have to meet the new tenant. She's cute as a button." And I'm thinking, Catherine, I collect the rent for you guys. I fix stuff around the farm. I don't really need to meet the tenants. And she said, "Oh, she's just darling, and I know that the two of you will get along just fine." And so my wife was renting the apartment above their garage. And so we went up the back stairs, and she knocked on the door, and, and this is what happened, I swear to you. Trisha, darling, are you in there? And so this young lady came over, and she answered the door and opened it up. And Catherine walked me in there, and it went something like this. Trisha, this is my other son, David. He practically lives here, so we just adopted him. But I figured since the two of you were about the same age, you two might get along just fine. But now that the introductions are done, I'll leave you two to get acquainted. I'm sure you don't need a chaperone or anything. You're two grown, sensible adults. Now, I have a ham in the oven, so you two kids get acquainted, all right? Now, bye-bye. And that's how I met my wife. Catherine hates it when I tell that story because she says that's not the right voice, and she does use conjunctions, but it's my story, so I get to tell it however I want. So, so instead of leaving for college, I wound up with 6 more months of life experience with a very beautiful and intelligent woman. She's actually she's a high school biology teacher, so she helps me understand some of the science behind some of the things that I try and do when it comes to self-sufficiency and preparedness and things like that. Somehow we made the long-distance relationship work. She was in my hometown, and I was 3.5 hours away in the mountains at Appalachian State. And so she would come visit me one weekend. I'd come home and visit her and my family one weekend. And then the third weekend, I would stay up there and I would work because I was working in a restaurant at night as a cook. And so I would use the extra weekend that I was there to help pay rent and car payment and insurance and all that fun stuff. Books, those are fun. Never cheap. But eventually I transferred to the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And she moved from my hometown to Charlotte. And we got a place there together. Shh. We were living in sin. And her mother didn't know that we were living together, so I didn't answer her phone for like 2 years. It was awesome. I never had to answer the phone. It's probably why I don't like using phones nowadays. It drives my wife crazy. But eventually, after taking so many years off between high school and college, I eventually graduated from college in '98 with a degree in English and a specialization in, actually a dedicated minor. It's a specialization, but it's technical communications. So I've been working as a BA in the IT field ever since. We were actually married a month after I graduated. So spent a couple years. We traveled to Europe a few times for my work. Our oldest daughter arrived in 2003. Our oldest daughter arrived in 2002, and our youngest daughter arrived in 2003. But after the oldest one was born in 2002, we moved to the Midwest, back to my wife's hometown, because her entire family, save for her sister, lives within about 6 blocks of each other in a suburb here. And so we moved back to have our kids grow up near family. My oldest daughter now, she's a freshman in college. And my youngest one will be off to college in about 18 months. So we're, a year and a half away from being empty nesters. Yay! They need to get out. They need to move on. They need to get some good life experience. I currently work for a large Canadian IT firm. It's a global firm, about 75,000 employees. Most of the work I do in my area is with state government, but I've got a lot of experience doing stuff with large private sector employees. When you work as a BA, a business analyst in the IT industry, you tend to be very detail-oriented because you're trying to define how these complex IT systems work, whether it be interfaces between state and federal systems, interfaces between different siloed business units if you're in the private sector. So it can get very granular, which explains why I write the way that I write. I am a published author. I have 8 books to my credit. Let's see, there's a 5-part fictional series in the post-apocalyptic dystopian genre, and 3 nonfiction books. The book that kind of started all of this, all of my thought processes and my approach to different things in life nowadays, is really, it was my first book. It was a nonfiction book, a cooking and entertainment book titled Just a Small Gathering. I wrote that kind of on a lark after being laid off during the housing bubble crisis thing in 2009. So while I was unemployed, I found myself taking cooking classes at the local high school through like an extension program with the community. And the guy that was teaching the class, he was actually an HR rep but he used to be a former restaurant owner and chef, and so he was just cooking on evenings, classes, what have you, to kind of pass the time. So we both hit it off pretty well, and we wound up writing this cookbook together. And during the course of writing that book, I learned a lot about the food industry. His name, Scott, my friend, he was constantly schooling me in the food industry and how things really worked when it came to processed foods and GMOs versus heirloom, growing it yourself, etc. So, I was already fascinated with things like hydroponics and aquaponics, and that's really the ultimate goal as I save up to buy land to put in some greenhouses and things of that nature. But that book really opened my eyes to a lot of things that are going on within big ag that I'm not a fan of. And ironically, during this time frame, one of my daughters, I think it was my oldest daughter, she had been given the children's edition of a book titled Omnivore's Dilemma. And let me tell you, if you want to live your life in a complete state of ignorant bliss, do not read that book. Because the introduction alone will turn you into a self-sufficient, preparedness-minded person, and there's no coming back. That whole introduction was about what the author, Michael Polian, I believe, discovered about potatoes and where potatoes came from and how potatoes are grown. Basically, you have large circular farms out in the Northwest, and in the middle of that is a sprinkler system, irrigation system, on a pivot point in the middle of the farm. And when the potatoes get ready to harvest, they spray a chemical in the fields. But the problem is, if that irrigation system breaks down for any reason, it is not safe for a human to go into the field to fix it for 3 to 5 days. Now, they just sprayed whatever that chemical was on a potato, which you're eventually going to eat either in the form of a French fry at a fast food restaurant. You're going to eat that as a baked potato at home or in a restaurant. So, it was stuff like that I was like, this is crazy. Nope, never going to do that. So, it's stuff like that. And, and ultimately that's what this podcast is really for. It's me trying to convey years of experience and knowledge to you, the listener, so that you can continue to progress toward being self-sufficient and better prepared for what life throws at you. Because really, I don't want you to ever have to go to a government shelter. I don't want you to have to compete with the horde of locusts that are going to descend in your area onto stores, gas stations, grocery stores, whatever, hardware stores, anything, in search of supplies when calamity strikes. The caveat here, though, is that, obviously I do not know everything, but perhaps something I say can help you in some way. Besides, it's always great to learn different ways to do things. There's always more than one way to do something. Knowledge is power when it comes to preparedness, because with knowledge comes the ability to solve a myriad of problems in a variety of ways and in a variety of situations. Eventually, though, hopefully, knowledge can eventually turn into wisdom. So that's something to shoot for. Let's see, what else? As for the other books, I wrote like I said, the 5-part fictional series. The series is titled Foreign and Domestic, which I understand is not very original. And I found that out right as I was about to publish the first book. So the name of the book changed. So the 5 books are titled When Rome Stumbles, Hannibal is at the Gates, By the Dawn's Early Light, Colder Weather, and lastly, A Time for Reckoning. So basically, in part 1, When Rome Stumbles, I took my newfound love of dystopian post-apocalyptic fiction, and I coupled it with my newly gained knowledge of the food industry, and then I promptly turned around and crashed the big ag food industry. So that was fun. In part 2, Hannibal is at the Gates, I carried a terrorist element or storyline forward that I had kind of threaded into part 1, and I carried that forward so that I could have a series. And basically what I did is I took some old colonial adversaries, and they managed to form a cabal of sorts. And this cabal thought it would be a good idea to call in all of their markers on their U.S.-owned debt. Basically, they showed up like Joe Pesci in Goodfellas and said, "F you, pay me." And we couldn't pay them, so I basically crashed the financial industry. In part 3, that terrorist element kind of comes to fruition, and the full breadth of that storyline comes to bear. And I crashed the electrical grid. So we spend the better part of that book trying to explore the concept of when rule of law doesn't exist, how do you address that? And so that's a fun little read. Part 4, Colder Weather. I wanted to change it up, so parts 4 and 5 take place 20 years after the EMP that happens in part 3. And so basically we get to see how my characters try to survive after this trinity of pain. So we've had a great die-off after the EMP, and then that eventually led to a civil war because the population is just generally pissed off at the government. And then as that kind of civil war is kind of, after they've slaked their appetite for revenge on members of Congress, the governors of various states, they start their own little clan wars of sorts, regional clan wars. And, they start trying to claim all kinds of resources and materials, gear, National Guard equipment, water rights, mineral rights, land rights, etc. But to give us somebody to hate, I threw in a socialist dictator for a president. So that's always fun. It gave me a lot of interesting avenues to explore. And then in part 5, I bring the series to a conclusion. And there's a couple of wonderful scenes for some characters that, you wish they were dead when you read about some of the things that I had them do in part 4 and part 5, and so they get their comeuppance. So you pick that up. It's fun. My most recent publications, let's see, they're non-fiction. And in November, I published a book called Home Remedies, Poultices, Salves. I say salves. Salves. Some people say salves. I don't know. It's got an L in it. But Home Remedies, Poultices, Salves, and Tinctures. It's basically 200 pages of recipes to address all manner of ailment, using ingredients that you can grow in your backyard or in a window box or in a container plant. So that's a good read. I actually had a friend of mine who's a doctor. He's a chief of staff at a regional hospital, And so I had him kind of proofread the book, and he provided a nice little foreword for me. So that was nice of him. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And my most recent book was released in January of 2021. And that book is titled Preparing to Prepare, A General Guide to Self-Sufficiency and Preparedness. So in this one, I take a duration-based approach to preparedness and what you can do to be self-sufficient and outlast a minor, moderate, or major disruption. And for clarification, for the purposes of this book, I defined a minor disruption as being a week or less, a moderate disruption as being a week to a month, and a major disruption as anything lasting more than a month. All 8 of my books are available on Amazon through my overlords there in Kindle and paperback. Parts 1 through 3 of the fictional series are also available on audio format, and parts 4 and 5 will hopefully be available in part 4 in the summer of 2021, and part 5 probably late 2021 or early 2022. The narrator's obviously got other projects besides my own, so the narrator's name is Dan Carroll. He's a very nice man. I enjoyed his voice, and he's very amicable to the requests that I make. Who knew? You know, like when you see the word OUI on paper, to me, it's always pronounced oui, the French yes. But Parisian French pronounces it way. And since my narrator's up in Canada, he's got the French Canadian, he pronounces it way. So when I was listening and reviewing his audio, and he kept saying way, and I'm reading along in the book, and I'm like, where did he get way? You know, so we had a back and forth, and I was like, you know what, for Americans, for our purposes, can you please pronounce we as way? So there might be an occasional way in there, so be on the lookout for that. So that's me and my background, basically in a nutshell. And as for this podcast, I honestly plan on talking about anything and everything. Hence the Lightning Hour name, which means books, current events, politics, religion, immigration, food, fire, water, shelter, gear, firearms, bladed weapons, the whole gambit. And at various points, I will try and find some people to interview, bring in their expertise, like my friend Scott, who knows a great deal about the food industry, about restaurants, about natural versus processed ingredients. And because I work in IT, like I said before, a large part of this IT workforce, there's a lot of people here from different countries, a lot of immigrants. They didn't necessarily take American jobs per se, but they have an interesting perspective on U.S. immigration policy when you try to do it legally. So there's a young man that is pretty new to the Christian faith, and he's also an immigrant, so he can provide multiple perspectives about not only his walk with Christ, but also with immigration. So there's two very different topics, but there you have it. And then I have another friend of mine. She's from Jamaica. Very, very strong Christian. And I got a phone call from her Wednesday. And she called me. She was in tears because Rush Limbaugh had died. She's a very strong conservative, and I thought it might be interesting to have conversations with these two, so that you can see people that are coming to the country legally, that have a deep appreciation for rule of law, for this country and the benefits that this country can provide. And I've talked to them both kind of in passing, and they said they'd be interested in doing that. So be on the lookout for that. Plus, I have my friend Scott. I already mentioned him. And I'm also in pretty good with some folks at some local shooting ranges and at various call them gun stores and blade weapon stores, and so I want to try and bring on a gunsmith and a gun store owner perhaps to talk about maybe the FFL process, or interesting things that the gunsmith sees when people drop off their firearms, and or the somebody that deals with the bladed weapons and the best types of sharpening stones, or the best methods, or depending on what your situation is, what types of recommendations would they make, things of that nature. So that's half an hour on my podcast. That's my first podcast. Look at me go. So I hope that you'll come back, and the next episode we'll start digging into some topics. It could be anything. I might jump around a little bit. We'll talk about, probably in the first 5-10 minutes, we'll talk about current events and politics, and what Comrade Kamala and her don't get me started. I just can't take them anymore, and they've only been there less than a month. We might also talk about investments, investment strategy. Not that I'm going to dispense with investment advice, but I can tell you what I did as a hedge against these yahoos when you put a Democrat in the White House. So we'll probably talk about that for the first couple minutes, first 5-10 minutes, like I said, and then I'll pick a topic out of. I'll pick a topic out of the Preparing to Prepare book, and we'll talk about that in a way that kind of expands or expounds on on what I wrote in the book. So I hope you enjoy that. So this is Dave Kershner with the Dave Kershner Lightning Hour, and I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll come back next week. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.